The fluorescent hum of the DEA office was Tom Briggs's constant companion, long after most desks had emptied. At 53, the lines etched around his eyes weren't from laughter, but from years of staring at grainy surveillance photos and the grim faces of victims. His dedication was a heavy cloak, woven from 2 decades of chasing shadows, a relentless pursuit that had cost him a marriage, most of his hair, and the ability to sleep soundly through the night. A cold coffee mug sat beside a stack of files, a testament to another missed dinner, another evening sacrificed on the altar of a case that demanded everything. His current obsession, the elusive El Fantasma cartel, felt like the culmination of every sacrifice. For 3 agonizing years, El Fantasma had operated with near impunity, a ghost in the machine, flooding the streets with death and despair. Tom had poured every waking hour, every shred of his weary soul, into dismantling the network, only to see it shift, adapt, and resurface like a hydra. The frustration was a constant knot in his gut, a cold, hard reminder of the lives lost and the justice deferred. He knew he was close, felt it in his bones, but close had been the mantra of every dead-end lead for too long. The persistent hum of the server rack in the back corner of his office was the only sound as Tom stared at the email. It had arrived through a convoluted series of encrypted relays, bouncing from a server in the Caymans to a burner phone in Eastern Europe, finally landing in a dead-drop account he used only for the most sensitive intelligence. The sender's name, Vargas M., flashed like a neon sign in his tired brain. Mateo Vargas, El Fantasma's chief legal counsel, a man whose name was synonymous with clean escapes and expertly buried evidence. A man Tom had been trying to link to anything prosecutable for years. The subject line was stark, an opportunity for justice. Tom clicked it open, his cynicism warring with a sliver of desperate hope. The message itself was brief, devoid of pleasantries. Vargas claimed he possessed irrefutable evidence against El Fantasma, enough to dismantle his entire operation, provided certain conditions were met. The audacity of it, a cartel lawyer dictating terms to a federal agent, was breathtaking. But the offer, the sheer possibility of finally putting El Fantasma away, made his breath hitch. The last line confirmed the source and added an unsettling personal touch. "I've been watching your work, Agent Briggs. You're the only one I trust." The conditions were outlined in a second, larger encrypted file attached to Vargas's initial email, a file that unfurled like a poisoned scroll on Tom's screen. His initial surge of hope curdled into a cold dread as he read. Mateo Vargas wasn't just asking for protection, he was demanding an impossible rescue mission. The terms were explicit, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Tom Briggs, personally and alone, was to infiltrate a specific heavily fortified compound deep within the Sierra Madre Occidental, a known stronghold of El Fantasma. His target: Vargas's wife, Elena, and their 2 young children, Sofia and Marco, aged 7 and 4. The cartel, Vargas's message elaborated, had taken them as guests after Vargas began quietly funneling information to rival factions, a contingency plan he now regretted. They were, he implied, living under a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless, serving as El Fantasma's ultimate leverage against him. "Their safety," the message concluded, "is paramount. Only once they are free, truly free, will I provide the evidence you seek. And only you, Agent Briggs, can accomplish this. No agency, no military, just you. Their lives depend on your discretion and your unique resourcefulness." The words hung in the stale office air, painting a terrifying picture of a one-man war behind enemy lines. Tom reread Vargas's impossible demand, the words blurring on the screen as a cold sweat pricked his forehead. This wasn't just a violation of protocol. It was an act of insubordination so egregious it could end his career, if not his life. He was being asked to operate as a ghost, off the books, deep in enemy territory, all for the family of a man who had enabled countless atrocities. The DEA didn't conduct snatch-and-grab operations for cartel lawyers, especially not solo. The lines were not just blurring, they were dissolving. Becoming a smuggler, even for a righteous cause, meant shedding the uniform, abandoning the badge, and stepping into the moral quicksand he had fought against his entire career. He pictured the faces of the victims El Fantasma had left in his wake, the devastated families, the communities ravaged by addiction and violence. A takedown of this magnitude, the thought whispered, could save countless lives. But at what cost? His own integrity, the lives of Vargas's family, or even his own if he failed. The immense risk to himself and, by extension, the agency's reputation was staggering. Yet the possibility of finally silencing El Fantasma, the ghost he'd chased for so long, was a siren song, pulling him towards an unthinkable, morally perilous decision. The decision, agonizing as it was, solidified in the quiet hum of his office. He would go. The risk was monumental, but the alternative, letting El Fantasma continue his reign of terror, was unacceptable. First, he needed to disappear. Reporting Vargas's offer to his superiors was out of the question. The mission's clandestine nature, the target's location, and the sheer audacity of Vargas's demands would be met with immediate dismissal, possibly even disciplinary action. Any leak, any official involvement, would surely trigger Vargas's execution and the cartel's immediate retaliation against his family. This was his burden, and his alone. Tom spent the next few days working a meticulous second shift, long after his colleagues went home. He began by contacting a retired operative, an old friend from his early days in narcotics, a man known only as Mac. Mac, now running a legitimate but discreet charter service, was the only person Tom trusted with such a dangerous, off-the-books request. Their conversation was brief, coded, and left no digital trace. Next, Tom liquidated a significant portion of his meager retirement savings, knowing he'd need cash, untraceable and plentiful. He dusted off an old, rarely used passport and began constructing a new identity. A down-on-his-luck independent trucker looking for illicit work across the border. Every step solidified his isolation, highlighting the terrifying solitude of the path he'd chosen. The transformation began in earnest. Tom knew that a DEA badge was a death sentence in cartel territory, but an American face, even a grizzled one, would still draw suspicion. He needed to become someone else entirely. Mac, true to his word, provided the resources. First came the lessons in dialect. Hours were spent listening to audio files, mimicking the specific cadences and slang of the border regions, scrubbing away decades of standard English and law enforcement jargon. Tom practiced until his throat ached, his tongue fumbling over unfamiliar sounds. Then came the physical alterations. A crude but effective tattoo was applied to his forearm, a symbol common among independent transporters. His hair was cropped shorter, a rough, unkempt style. He cultivated a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, aided by a deliberate neglect of shaving. Mac provided a beat-up, nondescript pickup truck, modified with hidden compartments and an array of false papers. Tom practiced driving it, learning its quirks, understanding how a weary smuggler would handle his rig. He studied maps of the Sierra Madre until the contours of the mountains were seared into his memory, identifying choke points, hidden trails, and potential safe havens. His DEA-issued sidearm was replaced with a civilian model, acquired off-book, and he practiced drawing and firing until it felt like an extension of his arm. Every detail, from the worn boots to the faded denim, screamed small-time operator, a persona he had to embody with every fiber of his being. The dusty, unpaved road rattled Tom's teeth, the old pickup truck kicking up a plume of red dirt that settled on everything. He crossed the border under the cover of a moonless night, the false papers holding up to the cursory glance of a bored border guard. Now, deep in the heart of Sinaloa, every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every distant engine hummed with menace. The air was thick with the smell of diesel, dust, and something else, a pervasive sense of watchful danger. His first real test came at a makeshift checkpoint, a couple of young men, barely out of their teens, cradling automatic rifles. Tom slowed, his heart thudding a rhythm against his ribs he hadn't felt since his rookie days. He offered a practiced, weary nod, his Spanish drawled just so. Just passing through, boys, heading deeper, got a load to pick up. One of them, his eyes too old for his face, peered into the truck bed, then at Tom's face, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He ran a hand over the worn tattoo on Tom's arm. "You look new around here, old man." Tom shrugged, a practiced gesture of indifference. "Been around long enough to know a good run when I see one. Plenty of business for everyone, eh?" The boy smirked, then waved him through. Tom drove on, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, the close call a stark reminder of the thin ice he was skating on. Every kilometer deeper into cartel territory, the tension ratcheted up, the stakes rising with each passing mile. Days later, after navigating treacherous mountain passes and bribing his way through a final, more sophisticated checkpoint, Tom finally arrived at the sprawling, fortified compound. It was less a compound and more a self-contained village, high walls topped with razor wire, armed guards visible at every vantage point. He'd used the prearranged code, a phrase about a special delivery for the boss, to gain entry. He was directed to a secondary building, a large, well-appointed house on the edge of the complex. Inside, the air was heavy with unspoken fear. He found Elena Vargas in a sparsely furnished living room, her face pale and drawn, her eyes flickering with a mixture of terror and a desperate, fragile hope. The children, Sophia and Marco, clung to her skirts, their small faces mirroring their mother's anxiety. Tom introduced himself as Ricardo, a new driver sent by their father. Elena's gaze was sharp, assessing. She knew she had to. Her husband had clearly prepared her for this moment, but the reality of a stranger, a gringo, in their luxurious prison must have been jarring. "Your husband sends his regards," Tom began, his voice low, his Spanish laced with the regional accent he'd meticulously practiced. "He assures me you are safe for now, but he needs you out, tonight." Elena's eyes widened, a silent plea for confirmation. Tom met her gaze, projecting calm authority. "It won't be easy, there are risks. But your husband has faith in me, and I believe we can do this." The children whimpered softly, sensing the gravity in the adult's hushed tones. Establishing trust while maintaining his fabricated identity was a precarious dance on the edge of a knife. The plan was simple: wait for the changing of the night guard, slip the family into the truck's hidden compartments, and drive out with a falsified manifest. Simple until the unexpected happened. As twilight deepened, a new, hulking guard, scarred and watchful, replaced the usual sleepy-eyed teenager at the main gate. Tom saw him pacing, a dog on a short leash, inspecting every vehicle, every face. This wasn't part of the routine Vargas had provided. Then, a sudden, urgent voice crackled over a nearby guard's radio. "All units, increased patrols. El Jefe suspects a rat, double everything." Tom's blood ran cold. El Fantasma was suspicious. Had Vargas been discovered, or was this a routine tightening, a stroke of terrible luck? Elena, overhearing the radio chatter from inside, gripped Tom's arm, her eyes wide with terror. "What does that mean, Ricardo?" she whispered, the children whimpering beside her. Tom had to improvise. The hidden compartments were too risky now. A thorough search would expose them. He needed a distraction, something loud and undeniable. His gaze fell on a stack of empty fuel drums near the perimeter fence. A dangerous idea, but desperation clawed at him. He knew he had to act, and fast, before the new security protocols solidified and their window of opportunity slammed shut forever. The entire compound felt like a coiled viper, ready to strike at the slightest provocation. The fuel drums. It was a desperate, dangerous gamble, but the only path forward. Tom grabbed Elena's arm. "Listen carefully. We're going to create a diversion, a big one. When you hear it, get the children and go to the old service gate on the north side. There's a blind spot. Wait for me." He saw the terror in her eyes, but also a flicker of resolve. He handed her a small, old-fashioned compass. North. He slipped out, moving like a shadow towards the drums. But as he approached, a figure emerged from the darkness. El Diablo, a mid-level enforcer he'd seen earlier, known for his cruelty and a penchant for gambling. El Diablo blocked his path, a lazy smile on his face. "Lost, old man, or perhaps looking for something extra to carry?" Tom's mind raced. He had no choice. He pulled out the roll of cash he'd saved for emergencies. "A little something extra for you, Diablo. I noticed a discrepancy in the fuel logs. A significant amount, someone skimming. I can make it worth your while to look the other way for a few minutes." He pushed a thick wad of bills into the enforcer's hand. El Diablo's eyes widened, then narrowed in suspicion, but greed won out. "A few minutes, old man, and if you're lying, I'll find you." Tom nodded, his stomach churning. He was bribing a criminal, enabling a theft, all to save a family. The lines of right and wrong had never been so thoroughly erased. With a nod, El Diablo turned, heading towards the fuel office, giving Tom the precious window he needed. Tom emptied the last of the fuel drums, then with a well-aimed shot from his civilian pistol, ignited the spilled gasoline. A roar of fire and a plume of black smoke erupted, instantly drawing guards away from the main gate. Sirens wailed and shouts filled the night. This was his window. He sprinted to the service gate where Alina, clutching her terrified children, waited as instructed. "Get in the truck quickly," he urged, ushering them into the back seat. He slammed the door and floored the accelerator, the pickup truck lurching forward just as a group of armed men rounded the corner, their rifles spitting fire. Bullets pinged off the truck's reinforced frame, shattering the rear window. The escape from the compound was only the beginning. The next 36 hours were a blur of adrenaline and near disasters. They abandoned the truck after it took too many hits, switching to a prearranged rendezvous with one of Mac's contacts, a grizzled old rancher with a beat-up Jeep and an intimate knowledge of forgotten mountain trails. They dodged cartel patrols, narrowly escaping a roadblock by plunging down a steep, treacherous ravine. Sophia cried herself to sleep on Alina's lap, while Marco, surprisingly resilient, pointed out birds. Tom, fueled by sheer will, navigated by starlight and an internal compass, guiding them deeper into the desolate, unforgiving landscape, always moving, always watching. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford, the taste of dust and fear a constant companion. Every shadow held a potential ambush, every distant vehicle a new threat. They were a hunted quarry, their survival hanging by a thread. Tom, haggard and bone-weary, finally delivered Alina and the children to the designated safe house just across the U.S. border. It was a nondescript ranch, another of Mac's carefully cultivated assets, guarded by 2 former Special Forces operators. Alina's relief was palpable, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her children, then offered Tom a silent, profound look of gratitude. His part of the bargain was fulfilled. Within hours, Mateo Vargas, now in secure federal custody, began to sing. And he didn't just sing, he conducted an entire opera. His testimony was a meticulously detailed exposé, backed by encrypted ledgers, digital communications, and witness statements that dismantled El Fantasma's empire piece by piece. Vargas provided locations of hidden assets, names of corrupt officials, routes of drug shipments, and even the internal power struggles within the cartel. The intelligence was explosive. Back in the DEA offices, unaware of Tom's rogue mission, a massive multi-agency operation was swiftly mobilized. Raids were launched simultaneously across 3 countries. Major arrests were made, tons of narcotics seized, and billions in illicit funds frozen. News channels flashed headlines about the unprecedented takedown of El Fantasma's network. For the first time in 3 years, Tom felt a surge of triumph, a bittersweet vindication for all the sacrifices. The ghost, it seemed, was finally caught. The DEA offices were buzzing with victory, but Tom couldn't shake a lingering unease. Something about Vargas's composure, even after all the chaos, didn't sit right. He reviewed the intel, cross-referencing Vargas's statements with existing, older DEA files. A small detail snagged his attention. A property record for a villa in Guadalajara, listed under a shell corporation, one that Vargas had forgotten to mention. He pulled up satellite imagery. The villa was lavish, secluded, and remarkably similar in layout to the fortified compound he'd just extracted Vargas's family from. More disturbingly, a closer look at the timestamps on some of Vargas's supposedly incriminating digital communications revealed a subtle pattern. Messages indicating imminent danger to his family only appeared asterisk after Tom had made initial contact. The gut punch came when he discreetly sent one of Mac's contacts to the Guadalajara villa. The report was chillingly concise. Vargas's wife, Elena, and two children, Sofia and Marco, were observed entering the property freely yesterday afternoon. They appeared relaxed and unharmed. No guards, no signs of duress, just a family coming home. The truth hit Tom with the force of a physical blow. Vargas's captivity was a meticulously staged performance. The children were never in danger. The entire elaborate scheme, the perilous rescue mission, the constant threat to Tom's life had all been a calculated deception. He hadn't rescued a family. He had been a puppet in a much larger, far more sinister game. The triumph he'd felt curdled into bitter ash. Tom stared at the report from Mac's contact, the words burning into his mind. Vargas hadn't just wanted to turn state's evidence. He'd orchestrated a coup. El Fantasma's network, while extensive, had grown unwieldy, riddled with old loyalties and inefficient structures. Vargas, the cunning lawyer, had seen an opportunity to dismantle his boss's established power base without getting his own hands dirty, effectively clearing the board for his own ascension. The captivity of Elena and the children was the masterstroke. It provided Vargas with an unimpeachable motive for cooperation, saving his family, while simultaneously manipulating a dedicated, if desperate, federal agent into doing his dirty work. The supposed fortified compound was merely a lavish safe house, the guards either complicit or unaware actors playing their part in a grand charade. Elena's terror had been convincing, perhaps even genuine in the moment, but it was a performance for Tom, a calculated emotional lever. The children, innocent pawns, had simply been along for the ride. Vargas hadn't betrayed El Fantasma for justice, he'd betrayed him for power. By feeding Tom just enough actionable intelligence to cripple El Fantasma's operation, he eliminated his rival, cleared out the deadwood, and positioned himself to step into the vacuum, stronger and more ruthless than before. Tom, the seasoned investigator, had been used, his moral compass twisted, his life put on the line, all to serve a cartel lawyer's ambition. The bitter taste of betrayal filled his mouth. Tom sat in his silent office, the city lights a distant blur outside his window. The news reports still hailed the DEA's triumph, but for him, the victory was hollow, tainted by the bitter taste of manipulation. He risked everything, crossed every line he swore to uphold, all to become a tool in a cartel lawyer's ruthless ascent. His judgment, once his most trusted asset, felt irrevocably compromised. How could he have been so blind? So desperate for a win that he'd ignored every red flag. The moral gray areas of his profession had always been present, but now they consumed him, a suffocating fog. He had dismantled one criminal empire, only to unwittingly pave the way for another, potentially more cunning one. Vargas was safe, his family secure, and El Fantasma's power fractured, but the cost to Tom's soul felt heavier than any badge. He wondered about Elena, about the children. Were they complicit? Or were they just as much pawns as he was, forced into a charade by a man who saw everyone as expendable? The hum of the fluorescent lights, once a comforting presence, now grated on his nerves. He picked up his cold coffee mug, his reflection staring back, a tired, older man, haunted by the enduring power of deception. Justice, he realized, wasn't always clean, wasn't always absolute. Sometimes it was a messy, brutal business, leaving even the victors with lingering questions and scars that ran deeper than any bullet wound. And sometimes the ghosts you chased weren't the ones you caught.